In this video, I want to discuss some of the notions that Blackburn begins to cover in his third chapter of his book, Think. And it's a chapter that is packed with information and an important chapter to be sure, but one that is particularly thorny and worthy of a slow pace. Unfortunately, we're not really going to give it much of a slow pace in this course because I want to try to get through as much of the book as possible. But it's good for, and also I don't think that we could really do justice to these questions the first time through. We would have to go through, encounter other notions, learn more things, come back, rethink it, given other issues of philosophical analysis like logic or philosophy of science maybe, or ethics, and then we can come back and think about this in a more informed way. But it's definitely a good start. Now, the thing about Blackburn and what he does here, and what you should walk away with as well, you should walk away with a lot of things, but definitely you get an example here of a philosopher who is willing to spend a lot of time carefully, providing working definitions of terms. And you get the sense that because he revises one over and over again, that he's not trying to present an absolutely critical definition, but he certainly is trying to nail one down that is better than just a fly by the seat of your pants definition. So he does write in a nonchalant way, and it's a very casual way, but I can guarantee you that he revised his. I think I could guarantee you that he revised his work just as any author would. I mean, you don't just send in a rough draft to your editor, or to the publisher. So this has been polished. This has been thought through. He didn't write this. I doubt he wrote this book overnight. So although he sounds casual, there's probably a studied approach in this chapter. All right, so free will is a cherished notion in the humanities, a cherished notion for people who think about what it means to be human in a secular way. And it just seems to be something that people are very, very reluctant to give up. So much so that some people will. It's rather an accepted or a conventional move, to say, well, in science we can see that physical law and the nature of materials themselves will dictate the outcome of a chain of events every time. But even though the scientists may say, not like every scientist, but there are a group that sort of embrace the sort of soft compartmentalism, and in science it's going to be this way, but in the realm of sociology or politics, somehow, even though as a scientist may speak, I should say as a physicalist, right, one who believes only in physical things, entities, the material, that person may say, but those observations are what gives us data in science, but they don't necessarily pervade all of human existence, and we can act and be a certain way so that we are free. Okay, but see, I'm struggling even to voice it, because in my mind, if everything is material, and if everything is truly chemical, physical, reaction, and the strange confluence of energy and sensation and resistance, which is now an accepted view of mass being nothing but the collected resistance of a certain packet of energy, giving it weight and momentum and force. Well, you know, if it's all that, then I don't know how you can escape the notion that a series of events under the umbrella of physical law can still have a place for human freedom, for the event to be otherwise. So we need to discuss what we probably mean by the word freedom, and Blackburn does attempt this. And he talks a lot about causal chains, and we'll talk about the two, by the way, not casual, right? Causal. It's easy. I probably will do it a couple of times in this video, but to get those two words mixed up. You'll see me looking down quite a bit. I'm just looking at a little sheet that keeps me on track, all right? Freedom, I think human beings want, at the bottom of it all, in a natural state, they want the autonomy, all right? I don't want to, you know, go into that discussion right now. Certainly you can challenge me on that, but I thought about it enough so that I've reached a conclusion that across the board, a human being in a natural state is going to desire autonomy, going to think of certain things as belonging to the self. I think that our current justice system is based upon the notion of property, and we tend to look at the body as our property in a that seems to be a very, you know, widely spread secular view. So you know, as long as we have things like consent and personal design upon our own property, we can do what we want with it. Those are some just obvious corollaries from this notion. We also tend to want to be individualistic, right? We tend to think of ourselves as unique and not, well, similar to others, to be sure, but still there's something about you, Y-O-U, that one person sitting right where you are that others don't have. And you know, you hear this notion just dished out all over the place. You're special, you're unique. Now, not even in the, there's a crass way to do that, to do this, where you may end up thinking in terms of, you know, your self-esteem being like a very high priority, and you need to build a good self-esteem, and anything that may pull down someone's self-esteem is to be avoided. That's a bit over the top, although that also is present in some parts of our society, that notion. But this softer notion of just uniqueness. You are unique. You are you. There's no other person in this world like you. That seems to be a commonplace in our culture too, and you know, that obviously is going to be connected to this idea that you are not a predetermined product. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that uncritically, superficially, on the surface of things, people tend to treat themselves as being free, as being unique, as being not a product of previous or predetermined conduits of physical causation or events or properties, and they tend to live life based on this sort of notion that they are in control of certain things, and that they can choose to not do something or do something given the same set of circumstances in an event, and that their minds and emotions and values will guide their actions, not, again, items or forces that are outside of their self. Okay, so we tend to, on an uncritical day, just assume that we are doing what we are. See, we are doing what we are doing. That's what we tend to do. Tend to think like that. Okay, so on a very you know, uncritical level, and I suppose a practical level, we treat ourselves as being free. we could be mistaken. So, I think that we definitely need to examine this critically. Also, it feels free. Yeah, I feel I feel like I'm actually moving my arm right now. Okay, and stopping it. This is my favorite experiment because it doesn't need any props. I always have my arm with me, Lord willing. I seem to be able to use that in a lot of experience. But I feel like I actually decided to do that, and then I did it. So I don't have any problems with this last series of events. I'm completely comfortable with it. I think that and then because of that, I may think that I'm in control of that. So the other thing is this. This is a much deeper. This probably is a much deeper reason why we tend to embrace this notion of, hey, I'm talking about society as a whole, the human race as a whole. Most of them tend to embrace this notion that um, we need to be free because we need justice. We need some sort of way to um, recognize and punish the activities that, now I'm speaking in terms of, say, maybe an evolutionist or a secularist who would say we need this sort of or Hobbesian who would say we need this sort of ability to recognize uh, activity that harms the human race as a whole and to protect ourselves and our property. We need to make a contract. We need to have ways to with each other, and we need to have be able to recognize whose property is whose and what is property, and then we need to understand that there are certain inalienable rights. So what is an inalienable right? It means that it's a right that by virtue of being human you have. You can never lose. You can never lose this right, right? So you just look at our founding fathers and the material they wrote down years ago, and you see that they espouse this notion, right? And so we need to have some sort of ability to punish those who don't recognize these rights or overstep the rights, don't respect the rights. And this whole notion of blame, all right? And of course, just think of how we do this. Say when a tree falls on, when a tree falls on a car, and Blackburn uses this phrase, doesn't he? We call it an act of God. And he's not referring to God. He's just saying it's a freak. No, we can't assign an agency to that. So we can't assign punishment to that. We're not going to punish the tree. We just aren't. But when someone behind another car hits our car and produces the same amount of damage, because there seems to be an agent in that car that could have done otherwise, right? We tend to look at blame and at sanctions or punishment. So, there's agency that's involved here, and there's this notion. Now, Blackburn does take a few. He brings this up a couple places. I wish he had done it a bit more clearly, but to be fair to him, if he were in this room, he may just look at me then and say, "Horn, I was as clear as I could be. I did it over a couple times." Maybe he did, but this notion of we are free when we could have done otherwise, given the exact same set of circumstances, the exact context, the exact everything. So let's quickly employ a thought experiment. Let's say you were participating in an event, and you did something. Maybe you shut the fridge door, and so you were standing in front of the fridge. The air temperature was a certain way. Your body chemicals were a certain way. The thoughts in your mind were certain thoughts, and the desires coursing through your psyche were certain, and the values at that moment with whatever vividness they had. Okay, and then you just shut the door. Okay, now let's set up an absolutely identical scenario with the same physical and social constructs around you. Could you have left the door open? if you could have done otherwise in the exact same scenario, I think that is the definition of freedom that Blackburn is pushing toward. Now, I also believe he's a compatibilist. We'll talk about these terms in a little bit, and he's trying to save the appearances here. And he admits at the end that he's not really, that he has left a lot of wiggle room and fuzziness, but he has decided to embrace the fuzziness. Okay. Before we actually get started with this, I do need to say that there is also there is a decently sized group of people that will flat out admit to you, we are not free. We've never been free. There are, some of these people are hardcore. I don't even want to say hardcore. I just want to say they're not suffering from schizophrenia. The scientists that do buy into soft schizophrenia, okay, not a double-mindedness. I'm not talking about clinical schizophrenia, but which apparently involves many headaches and vivid colors and dreams and things like that. But the scientists that are not willing to compartmentalize their system through which they evaluate their own existence and the world and reality. If they see something as being true in one arena by virtue of its being true, and connected to reality, it's true in all arenas. So they will tell you, I can't espouse this notion of freedom because I believe we are all, at the very end of it all, physical material, stardust, that has somehow, after years, ages, eons, millennia, Googles of years, we have somehow been animated by life, which they would confess ultimately to believing, even though it hasn't been proved, but they would say life at the end of it all is going to be a pure and physical phenomenon. And so there is no way that we are escaping the chemical and the atomic laws. Okay, so, one way to quickly think about physical laws is to just picture a pool table where you have one ball hitting another, and if the angles are right, that ball is going to go a certain way, and you can't do otherwise, right? I mean, but you have other things that are involved in the physical arena. You have chemical reactions, you have quantum physics, you have neuro, which probably is going to be classified under chemical and electromagnetic. I'm not certain about any of that, but you have all sorts of arenas of matter, ways we categorize matter, and how matter interacts with force, energy and force, for chemistry, electricity, the atomic, the strong atomic force, the weak atomic force, quantum mechanics. So, things are not as easy to see as the cue ball hitting another cue ball, but at the end of the day, you are going to have crass physicalism there operating, whether it's on classical physical laws first established by Newton, or on quantum mechanical laws brought about ironically by Einstein himself, so, and others, but we would say beginning of the 20th century. So they would say there is no freedom. There just isn't. It's an illusion. But it certainly is not bona fide freedom. All right. So, right off the bat, Blackburn does not like that idea. Okay. So I'm going to try to cover up to maybe the middle of the chapter. Blackburn doesn't like that idea, does he? And very few people actually do like that idea, because it does seem to make us have trouble with punishment. How do you punish somebody who is determined to do that, whose physical, the physical matrix surrounding this person, matrix as the mechanism of multiple interconnecting causes and and forces producing something. So we get our word womb from the matrix, and I think I would also argue that the word mother comes from the word matrix, matrix. Um, but I don't want to take it that far. But anyway, that sort of ground of where things come into being. If it could never have been otherwise for this particular bundle of energy and matter called John Q. Smith or whatever he is, how can we punish the fellow? So if he breaks one of the laws because he was always determined, we just can't blame that. Just as we can't blame the tree from falling on our car. So we've always had a trouble with that sort of physical determinism. Our whole theory of justice seems to be predicated on the notion that someone could have done otherwise. Right? Now, Blackburn does do a good job pointing out that there is a dilemma of determinism, and that people who assume that it's all controlled by material, causes, laws, entities, whatnot, quantum mechanics has allowed them to discuss this notion of randomness. And, in quantum mechanics, it has been shown that there is a probability, and the very fact that a probability exists means that it has at one time been possible and has happened. Given all things the same, as much as you can, as much as we can measure it, there is a physical event that happens in one instance of this time of examination, and in another instance, given all things being the same, that event has not happened. So there's this notion of it's actually random. But Blackburn says, well, even if you interject randomness, right, it in no way does this help you solve the problem, because that's just as bad. We can't assign punishment to a random event. So the fact that there is complete control, outside control over someone's actions, renders our justice system as, superfluous, or not superfluous, impotent. And then take away all control. If it's all random, it's chaos. So that's equally bad for our justice system. So I'm glad that he brought that up. Now, he also talks about and one thing he does very well is as I said before, he's just carefully working through his terms, right? He talks about the intervention theory, interventionists. And the interventionist is an old friend of ours. He's just someone who's going to say, well, there's a mechanism in us that is beyond the physical strictures, and it just intervenes. And it's the real me standing behind all the physical phenomenon, evaluating and taking control, and flipping switches and directing my activity. It is the me of my activity. And whether they call it a soul or not, whether they might, the word soul is a very unpopular word in our popular culture. It has been watered down to mean like base of emotions and all sorts of things, but it doesn't mean what it has meant for ages in history. Okay. But the person that is going to say, well, there's something in me that I just know is not controlled by physical, that's going to be the interventionist. And Blackburn talks about, hey, it's like a homunculus. The big problem of this, of course, is, well, is this something else, physical or not physical? If it's physical, then you don't escape the deterministic scheme or tidal wave or blanket. if it is not physical, then you have the mind-body problem all over again, and that's a killer. The mind-body problem is a contradiction in terms, so you can't have both. That's what Blackburn is saying. He has no patience for the interventionist theory, and I think rightly so. So that's done with. This notion that there is true physical entities, and then there's this non-physical thing that is somehow able to interact. Physical and non-physical, you have complementary classes, and the nature of a complementary class is they cannot connect. So anyway, this is dualism. This is the homunculus. It's got big problems, doesn't it? According to Blackburn, I think it's got big problems. Now, people have tried to present the interventionist idea in palatable terms. A palatable term is just language or description that we're comfortable with. But at the end of the day, when you look at exactly what they're saying we have a soul and a body, but then, well, that's fine, but then the question is, well, can you explain to me the mind-body problem? So they are, it's like they're working out a math problem, and at the end they say, yes, we have the desired answer we have, which is going to be, I have escaped the physicalism of determinism. But then you look back at the 10 steps they went through to get to the math problem and say, yeah, I know your conclusion looks good, but you've got a problem on your second step over here. It's the mind-body problem. So now, in saying that, you should also understand that I am personally saying, when you do philosophy, the steps and the questions you begin to ask go to the root of the system you're going to use to determine what is real and what isn't, what is right, what is wrong concerning your interactions with the real, what you are in the real, all that sort of thing. So you will eventually end up with a system that encompasses all of this. And to have a problem in one of the areas of the system is basically to have a problem with the whole system. So the interventionist does not escape the mind-body problem, and thus, for Blackburn, the interventionist has not produced a suitable answer to this question. Now, what about the compatibilist? Okay, now this is where Blackburn spends the most textual space of the chapter, so that I think that is, of course, I don't have Blackburn sitting in front of me. Maybe I should email the fellow, because I think maybe he's still alive. Anyway, you all should email him. Give it a shot. The last thing, the worst that could happen is he ignores your email, but maybe you get a conversation going with him. One virtue of that is you would be able to understand his emails, which is fantastic writing here. But anyway, I get the sense that he himself is a compatibilist of some sort, and he has to revise and revise and revise the definition, because he knows that he definitely doesn't want to embrace the mind-body dualism problem. But the compatibilist is going to say, look, human freedom or responsibility is somehow compatible with physicalism. Okay. And so, but it gets a little more complicated, because you have social constraints, you have knowledge levels, you have all sorts of things that go into the stew. But you can determine, and these things that go into the stew will obviously determine what the stew is going to taste like. But somehow, given once, I struggle with this, because I don't agree with Blackburn. I don't think that compatibilism is a suitable answer. I do think that eventually it results in the mind-body problem. Blackburn is incredibly fair about this. And at the end, if you look at the end, he does admit that things are very fuzzy still with this whole notion of the revised definition of compatibilism. So because of that, I struggle with accurately describing what he thinks compatibilism is. But I do have it here. I know you can't read this, but I'm laughing because I've got to quit. It's 30 minutes, so I'm saved by the bell. No, I would like to keep on going, but I've been dragging on these videos longer and longer, and I don't want you to get the idea that I'm not aware of your own time constraints with other projects you're doing. So I'm going to quit, but I'm going to come back to this, all right? Trust me on that.